This is my first video update from Nicosia, Cyprus on this Saturday morning. Let's talk about some news. This building has been under construction now for, I want to say 7 years. It seems 8 years. I wonder if they're ever going to finish it. All right, let's discuss the big story, which is that there will be peace negotiations in Yemen. That is the big story, and all of this is a result of the Chinese mediations between Saudi Arabia and Iran, the rapprochement that China negotiated. And because of this rapprochement between Saudi Arabia and Iran, we now have the beginning of what could be an end to the horrible war in Yemen. Even Reuters is reporting on this, and Reuters is saying that within the next week or two, we should have Saudi officials discussing a way to wind down the war, and within the year, we could actually have a complete peace in Yemen. This is fantastic news. And we talked about this on the Duran, me and Alexander, when the diplomatic relationship between Iran and Saudi Arabia was reestablished. Me and Alexander, we said that this could mean an end to the war in Yemen, and we didn't think it would happen this quickly. I was thinking maybe the next year we might get some signs that the war will wind down, but a couple of weeks after the Chinese mediated this peace between Saudi Arabia and Iran, we now have the announcement that we may be heading towards a peace in Yemen. A delegation representing Saudi Arabia and Oman is due to meet with the Houthi leadership in Sana'a next week to sign a permanent ceasefire ending the 8-year war in Yemen. Several outlets have reported, citing officials familiar with the talks. Sources told Reuters that an agreement could be announced by April 20th, the eve of the Muslim holiday of Eid al-Fitr, which marks the end of Ramadan. Incredible news. Excellent news, if you ask me. Let's talk about Blinken from Saudi Arabia, Iran, China, Yemen. Let's talk about Blinken and the U.S. Secretary of State. He gave an interview to Funke Media Group the other day, and he said that the spring offensive in Ukraine will be coming in the next few weeks. It is coming up, according to Blinken. And he said that there are two goals for Ukraine and Ukraine's friends and partners. That is the term that Blinken used. Two goals for Ukraine's many friends and partners. The first aim is helping Kiev win back territories, which mean assisting in a counteroffensive, Blinken said. And the second goal, according to Blinken, is supporting Ukraine in building up its medium and long-term capabilities to deter Russia and allow Kiev to defend itself from any future attack. Blinken also said in this interview that when the big offensive does take place and the Ukraine military reaches the border of Crimea, they're right outside of Crimea, then he said that it is up to Zelensky to decide what he wants to do. He said that the U.S. will support the armed forces of Ukraine, but when it comes to Crimea, it will be up to Zelensky whether he wants to enter Crimea and take over Crimea, capture Crimea, or whether he wants to do something else to allow Crimea to be as it is, to enter negotiations with Russia. That was what Blinken was hinting at. That's what he was talking about during the interview. He said, when Zelensky gets to Crimea, we'll leave it up to Zelensky to do what he wants to do. Blinken said that Ukraine is a democracy and Zelensky should listen to the will of the people. Yeah, Ukraine is a democracy, and I'm William Wallace. I don't know why that movie popped into my head. Anyway, I don't know. Maybe I need a coffee. So yeah, that was Blinken, and that was his statement with the counteroffensive. So Blinken is actually putting a kind of timeline. He did say it is coming up. It's coming within the next 2, 3, 4 weeks. I don't think he gave an exact timeline, but he said it is coming up. And everyone is saying that it's coming up. Ukraine analysts, Ukraine government officials, NATO, the Institute for the Study of War, Fox News ran an article and said it's coming up, and I'll get to that in a bit. Everyone is saying that the spring counteroffensive is coming up. And I have to say one thing. The rhetoric coming out of the U.S. State Department and people like Blinken, or the Institute of the Study of War, which is associated with Victoria Nuland in the U.S. State Department, because I do believe that it is Victoria Nuland's sister or sister-in-law that runs the Institute for the Study of War. Anyway, all of these groups that are associated with the U.S. State Department, they are very, very confident of the success of this offensive. In Blinken's interview with Funke, what I got out of it was that Blinken sees the spring offensive as being successful and Crimea as being captured by Ukraine, should Zelensky want to do that, as a given. I mean, Blinken, in the interview, he seemed to me to be saying that the success is 100%, and Crimea, well, that's also 100%. We're going to leave it up to Zelensky to decide what he wants to do, but we see the victory as a sure thing. That was the sense that I got from Blinken, and that is the sense that I'm getting from everyone that is connected or affiliated with the U.S. State Department. So in Cyprus yesterday, we had the Ukraine defense minister here, and he was begging the Cyprus government for ammunition. He was also in Bulgaria, and he was begging Bulgaria for ammunition and weapons. And then he went to Greece, and he was begging the Greek government for weapons and ammunition. The Greek government, by the way, did give him ammunition, but they refused to give him the S-300s, which is what Reznikov, the Ukraine defense minister, really wanted. He wanted those Russian S-300 missile defense systems, and the Greek government said, we can't give this over to you because we have an ongoing threats, ongoing problems with Turkey. That's the excuse that the Greek government gave, which was the right thing to say. Use the excuse of Turkey to not give over your weapons, because giving over your weapon systems like the S-300 to the Ukraine Zelensky government is very unpopular in Greece. The last time Mitsotakis, the Greek prime minister, gave weapons to Ukraine, 4 plane loads full of weapons to Ukraine, his government almost collapsed. So it's very unpopular giving weapons to Ukraine. So the Greek government, they said, look, we have issues with Turkey, and so we need these missiles, this missile defense system, the S-300. So what we'll give you is ammunition. Anyway, he went around Bulgaria, Greece, and then he was in Cyprus yesterday, Mr. Reznikov, and he was asking for ammunition. Now, this country of Cyprus is a population of maybe 800,000. So you can imagine that we don't have a powerful military. We have a military, It's decent. It's a good military. I won't even say it's decent. It's a good military for a small Mediterranean island. It does its job. But to come to Cyprus and to ask for ammunition and weapons so that you can fight the Russian military is ridiculous. It is ridiculous. And it shows desperation. That's what it shows. It shows a lot of desperation. So is this how a war is fought? Is this how a war is won? You have Anthony Blinken, the U.S. Secretary of State, saying that the counteroffensive will be happening in the next 2 or 3 weeks. It's going to be happening very soon. That's what Blinken said. It's coming up. The offensive is coming up, according to Blinken. And we know it has to happen in the next 2 weeks to say 1 month. Let's give it that type of range, because spring offensive is a spring offensive. And it's springtime. So it has to happen within the next couple of weeks to month. I'll even give it a month and a half. And at the same time, you have, as Blinken is saying that the offensive is coming up and it's ready to go and it's going to be successful, you have the defense minister running to Bulgaria, Greece, and Cyprus to ask for weapons and ammunition. Is this how you win a war? Doesn't seem like that's how you win a war to me. I don't know. To Cyprus, really? Really, Reznikov? Cyprus didn't have anything to give him, obviously, because if Cyprus was to give up its ammunition, even if it gave up all its ammunition, I imagine it would last for a total of 1 hour against the Russian military. I don't know. I mean, even if Cyprus gave up everything, how long would it possibly last in this war of attrition with Russia? So it's laughable. It's ridiculous that he came here and asked for ammunition, though there are rumors that Reznikov also had another request from the government of Cyprus. And these are rumors, and I can't confirm this, but they are saying, the media, various media sources here are saying that Reznikov also requested that Ukraine soldiers, recruits, are trained in Cyprus as well. He wants the Cypriot government to start training Ukrainian forces here on the island. So we'll see if that is indeed true. But the Cypriot government, they had no weapons, no ammo to give Ukraine. It's laughable that Reznikov came here asking for such things. Blinken on one side is saying that the offensive is going to happen, it's going to be successful, and when the Ukraine military gets to Crimea, it is at the mercy of Zelensky what happens to Crimea. While on the other side, you have the Ukraine defense minister running to Bulgaria, Greece, and Cyprus, hat in hand, trying to scrape up whatever ammunition he can scrape up so that he can take on the Russian military. What the F is going on? What is going on here? I want to get to a Fox News article, and they talk to someone who is associated with the Institute of the Study of War. At least that's what I got out of it. And this guy says that the spring counteroffensive is absolutely happening, and it will deliver big territorial changes. But before I get to that, let me just address the leak that happened the other day, which was this Ukraine Pentagon NATO war plan leak that happened. In the New York Times read an article about it, and they described what's going on with this leak and how the Pentagon is concerned that the battle plans of Ukraine have been leaked, and it's all over social media, and the Pentagon's trying to scrape all the internet to remove this information. So this leak was like a snapshot of the state of the Ukraine military for March 1st. So it gave a snapshot as to what position the Ukraine military finds itself for March 1st. And it even gave some casualty numbers. It talked about the equipment that had arrived in Ukraine, the equipment that Ukraine is waiting for. And when I read this report, specifically when I read the New York Times article, to be honest, I was like, this This is BS, man. This is BS. And I did a video with Alexander about this yesterday, and Alexander was kind of describing the report. He's like, I have to look into it a little bit, and I was like, that was my expression. I was like, yeah, I don't know. First of all, the first giveaway for me that this leak was bogus was the fact that the New York Times ran an article about it. To me, that was the giveaway. So the New York Times is now running articles exposing the situation of the Ukraine military for all the world to see. Come on, man. Come on, man. Really? So that right there for me was like, no way. No way. This is some sort of disinfo or some sort of psyop or something like that, because the New York Times would never, ever, ever in a million years jeopardize the success of the Ukraine military. It would never go against the Pentagon, NATO, or the Ukraine military by reporting what these documents claim to be, which is their whole military plan. The New York Times would never do that. Never. So for me, that was like red flag. Red flag. And then you have the numbers of everything that was involved. From what I understand, the first batch of documents that were circulating the internet said that there was X number of Ukraine soldiers that were killed and Russian soldiers that were killed. And then other batches of these documents that were on other accounts on the internet were giving different numbers. And you had the Pentagon saying we're trying to scrape these documents. And then you have Podolyak, Zelensky's BFF, and the Zelensky government saying that these documents are photoshopped. And you had all kinds of different stories about these documents. The equipment that these documents claimed had been handed over to the Ukraine military were not adding up. They were very low in number, and everything just seemed very, very fishy. And so now you're getting more analysts coming out who have really studied these documents, and they're saying that this was just one big psyop. And most likely this was done to probably take attention away from Bakhmut, and I'll get to that in a bit. But also this was done to give out the impression that the Ukraine military is weaker than it really is, or is struggling to obtain support from its allies, and just doesn't have many of the weapons that it's been asking for. It was probably something along those lines. It was meant to distract, to misinform, and I really do think the goal of these documents was to paint a picture of the Ukraine military which is just not accurate as the spring offensive is about to launch. And the bottom line is that the Russians, while they may look at a document like this, I doubt that they'll pay it much attention. I mean, the Russian military and Russian intel, they're not looking at documents leaked on Telegram or Twitter. Sure, they'll give it a look. I'm sure they have teams of people who look at social media and they give these things a look. But Russian intel, they know. I would imagine that they know what's going on with the Ukraine military, and I'm sure that they have a good idea as to what equipment has been handed over to the Ukraine military and what equipment is on its way. So anyway, I just wanted to say that about the New York Times leak. The first giveaway for any of this stuff, to me, before you even look at the documents, is just look at the source that is talking about this. And when it comes for the New York Times or CNN, well then, be very, very skeptical. So that's the New York Times document. And I mentioned Bakhmut, that maybe this was just a way to distract from Bakhmut, because from what I am getting this morning on this Saturday, and most of this is coming from Russian military sources, Russian analysts, is that Bakhmut is indeed falling, and falling very, very quickly. The Wagner PMCs are moving very, very quickly to take over the entire city of Bakhmut. There was about 15% of the city in the west that the Ukraine military was holding onto, like just barely holding onto it. And from what I understand this morning, it looks like the Ukraine military is now retreating. And they're trying to retreat from whatever narrow and small corridors were left open by the Russian military, most likely deliberately left open by the Russian military. And they're trying to retreat from those corridors to a different position. From what I understand, Chasov Yar, further west, that's where they're trying to get to. And as they're retreating, they're blowing up their equipment. And the Russian military is annihilating the forces that are retreating from this narrow opening in Bakhmut. I expect that in the next day or two or three, maybe Monday, Tuesday, maybe tomorrow, I expect we're going to get an announcement from more sources, not Ukrainian sources, let's say more Russian sources, maybe even Russian media, that Bakhmut is on the cusp of being taken over by Wagner. And maybe within the week, we're going to get the Russian Ministry of Defense saying that Wagner has been captured by Wagner. Now, keep in mind, this is Wagner. This is military contractors, a private military contract organization, though it is very much connected to the Russian military. It's still Wagner PMC. These forces have defeated the most powerful NATO army in Europe. And that is what Ukraine was built to be. Over the last 8-9 years, NATO, the Pentagon, all of Europe, they built up Ukraine to be the most powerful European army. Proxy army, you may want to call them, but I'll just say NATO European army. Maybe second to Turkey, you could say. And I'm saying Europe because I'm leaving out the United States. So as far as ground forces, like a standing army, ground troops, that's what NATO built up Ukraine to be. That's why European countries, EU nations, really didn't care much about their defense spending. They on the one side, they had America providing them protection, so they said we don't need to spend on military. And on the other side, they knew that the money that was going to be spent on building up a military in Europe was going to go to Ukraine for the purpose of building an army to destroy Russia. For the last 8 years, EU officials knew the plan. Merkel has talked about it to Vovan and Lexis. Hollande has talked about it to Vovan and Lexis. Poroshenko has talked about it. Merkel has actually given many interviews, and she's talked about the Minsk agreements and all this stuff. I'm just joking around, but all of these leaders, these EU leaders who have come and gone over the past 8 years, they have admitted that over the last 8 years, the goal was to agree to the Minsk agreement. And as Russia, in their mind, as Russia believed that this Minsk agreement was possible to bring a long-term peace to Ukraine, what they were doing on the back end, what they were doing in secret in their minds was that they were building up the Ukraine military to a level that would be able to destroy Russia. And they built up a very powerful military. So just keep that in mind as the news about Bakhmut continues to come in. The reality of the situation is that Wagner defeated NATO. That's big. That's a big deal. That is a very big deal. And keep in mind that the rest of the Russian military, not that the Russian military wasn't involved in Bakhmut, but for the most part, the Russian military, Putin, Shoigu, they preserved a large chunk of their forces, probably in anticipation for the spring offensive. And there was an article in Fox News that caught my attention. And this article has the title, Ukraine Ready Spring Offensive, expected to be the largest mobilization since the war with Russia began. And let me read you a little bit from this article. Quote, "We are now on the eve of a Ukrainian counteroffensive," George Baros, a Russian analyst and leader of the geospatial intelligence team for the Institute of the Study of War, told Fox News Digital. "And I think we're going to see some major map changes if the Ukrainians are able to be successful in the direction or directions they choose," he added. So I mentioned that Fox News talked to someone associated with the Institute of the Study of War. That is this George Baros guy. And keep in mind, the Institute of the Study of War is an extension of the U.S. State Department. It's a think tank, a private think tank, but we all know the game. We all know how things work in Washington. Further down in the article, Baros says that the Institute for the Study of War believes Ukraine and Russia have their sights set on Zaporozhye, the Zaporozhye region. And Baros says that the Zaporozhye region holds considerable value to both Ukraine and Russia. Baros explained that Ukraine needs the region for its port access to the Sea of Azov and the mineral industry in not only Zaporozhye, but in the neighboring Donetsk region to the east. Quote, "If you're going to control the port, you're also going to control the mineral extracts here. But the fact of the matter is that militarily, this territory is necessary to control what the Russians have in Kherson," he said, referring to the region directly west of Zaporozhye. The Zaporozhye region sits in between Kherson and Donetsk, which the analyst explained is not only needed if Ukraine wants to take back sea lanes as far west as Odessa, but to block Russia's ability to adequately supply forces in Crimea through its Kherson network. So I'm going to put up a map right now, and you can see where Zaporozhye is located. We've said this many times, that the plan that they've been talking about now for the last 3 months is that Ukraine moves east. They create this big strike force. Right now, we're hearing numbers of around 50,000 soldiers and hundreds of tanks. They're going to create this strike force. No air support, by the way. And this force is going to move east and then move quickly down south, like lightning speed down south towards Melitopol, and take over this, they call it like a triangle of cities. I forgot the other villages and towns, but Melitopol is the big prize. They're going to move down south. They're going to take over this triangle of cities and villages. That's going to cut the Russian forces in 2 zones. It's going to cut the supply lines of the Russian forces as well. And then the Ukraine military will be able to move towards Kherson and defeat the Russians there, while moving also towards Crimea and Donetsk and those areas in the east and in Donbass. And the thinking is that eventually the Ukraine military will be at the borders of Crimea. They'll be within a range of HIMARS missiles to hit a Crimea, and that's where they will have achieved victory and leverage over Russia. And then it's up to Zelensky what he wants to do. Does he want to negotiate with Putin, or does he want to capture Crimea? Zelensky said in a statement yesterday that the goal is to capture Crimea. That is what he said yesterday. Though we've had people in his administration who have said that Crimea may be something that they're willing to negotiate. So we'll see what happens. But Zelensky said yesterday that the goal is to capture Crimea. That is what Zelensky said. This guy Baros from the Institute of the Study of War did say further down in this article that this region of Zaporozhye, the spring offensive towards the region of Zaporozhye, could also be a ploy by Kiev in a similar move it used in the lead up to its successful recapture of Kharkiv, the great Kharkiv counteroffensive, where the Russian military just left to better defensive lines. They moved back to a better defensive position, which proved to be the correct move. And Ukraine defeated an army in Kharkiv that wasn't there. They just took over, empty territory. Like it would be like me, just coming here and taking over this empty parking lot. That's basically what happened in Kharkov, but that's the successful Kharkov offensive anyway. The Institute for the Study of War, this guy is saying that this whole Zaporozhye spring offensive could also be a fake out. They're talking so much about this. They've got the New York Times leaks, all of these battle plans that are floating around the internet, Blinken talking about it, Zelensky talking about it. This could all be one big fake out, and maybe the offensive is going to happen elsewhere. We'll see. I don't know where else this offensive could take place, to be quite honest. Bakhmut, are they going to try to recapture what the Russians are about to capture, what Wagner is about to capture? I don't know. Zelensky did say to Congress in December that Bakhmut will change the trajectory of the war. And then he gave a flag to Pelosi and Kamala Harris, signed by Ukraine military in Bakhmut. So is Zaporozhye one big distraction? And is the Ukraine military going to move from Chasiv Yar in the west and try to go into Bakhmut, a city which the Russians are now about to capture in full? Who knows? Who knows? But that's what the Institute of the Study of War said towards the end of this Fox News article. They talk a lot about Zaporozhye and how the offensive is going to work in Zaporozhye in pretty good detail. They talk about the offensive and its goals and how it's going to happen and how it's going to decimate the Russian military. And then towards the end of the article, they say this could be all a ploy, like what the Ukraine military did in Kharkiv, the Great Kharkov offensive. So that is the article from Fox News, interviewing this guy from the Institute for the Study of War. Let's now talk. Well, let me mention this before I get to the clown worlds. The Ukraine government, the Zelensky government, is destroying churches and it's burning churches, specifically in the Lvov region. They demolished a church in Lvov the other day, an Orthodox church, the Ukraine Orthodox Church, the only real Orthodox church in Ukraine. They destroyed a church, like demolished it, bulldozered it down, a church. They bulldozered a church, and then they set another church on fire. Robert Barnes mentioned it during our live stream that we did with the great Robert Barnes on the Duran. Check out that live stream. He mentioned that Ukraine, the Zelensky regime, is burning churches, everybody. Burning churches, and no one is saying anything in the West. And you had the mayor of Lviv, Andrei Sadovoy, who declared on Thursday that the canonical Ukrainian Orthodox Church, the UOC, in his city was no more. Local authorities have finished the demolition of the Church of St. Vladimir, while the Church of St. George has been turned over to the government backed by the Orthodox Church of Ukraine, the OCU. Quote, "In 2 days, we have ended the history of the Moscow Patriarchate in our city," Sadovoy wrote on his Telegram channel. He's happy about it. He's boasting about it. The real church, the Ukraine Orthodox Church, the recognized church of Ukraine, is no more in the west of Ukraine, and they have handed over the other church property to the heretical church of the heretical Orthodox Church of Ukraine, which goes by the name of the OCU, the Orthodox Church of Ukraine. That is the Orthodox Church that was created by Pompeo and the CIA, and they created this church in order to divide the Orthodox community. And they were very successful in doing that. So, just a tragic story, but it may be an indication of something else that may be happening in Ukraine, and that is that the west of Ukraine is being prepared for some sort of unification with Poland. And there are a lot of articles that are coming out now. One that came out from a Polish publication just the other day, and another one came out from Foreign Policy a couple of weeks ago, where they talk about recreating the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, I believe it was called, the kingdom, the empire that was Poland, Lithuania, which had parts of Ukraine as well as parts of Belarus. And Foreign Policy magazine, as well as this Polish publication, which goes by the name of, oh boy, this is a tough name to pronounce. I'm not even going to pronounce it. I'll put a screenshot on here. You had this Publisustuka, and I saw this on the Slaviangrad Telegram channel this morning. Anyway, they're basically writing the same thing that Foreign Policy wrote about a week ago on March 29th, which is that the best way forward in this new Europe is to recreate the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, empire, whatever you want to call it. Recreate this entity, because what it will do if you restore this Commonwealth, what it does is that it brings in Ukraine into NATO and into the EU without any of the procedures. So it manages to de facto bring in Ukraine into NATO and to the European Union. It acts as a buffer towards Russia. So you create a buffer towards Russia with gobbling up of this territory. And it acts as a counterweight to Germany and France in Europe. And it's a counter to Germany and France that is completely controlled by the United States, the neocons, and NATO. Poland is completely controlled by the neocons. Lithuania just might as well be called neocon land. It's completely controlled by the neocons. And so by merging Lithuania, Poland, and then swallowing up the west of Ukraine, you create a territory, a large territory, which the neocons have full control over. And so it solves a lot of problems for NATO, for the neocons of the collective West, and for the collective West, recreating the Commonwealth of Poland, Lithuania. It also threatens Belarus, because a chunk of Belarus is something that they would like to take over, to take a bite out of, because that would mean that they make this Commonwealth whole as to what it was way back when. So it does threaten, and it puts pressure on Belarus as well. So there is a lot of talk about this Commonwealth being recreated and the positive benefits that it provides to NATO, to the neocons, and how it acts not only as a deterrent against Russia. Not only does it mess around with Russia, but it also messes around with Germany and France in the European Union. It creates a very powerful entity in the European Union, an entity that the neocons have full control over. And I look at the church burnings and the church demolition and the statement from the mayor of Lvov saying that the Russian Orthodox Church, the Ukraine Orthodox Church, is no more in the west of Ukraine. I look at it as a type of clearing out, once again, more clearing out of any type of Russian history or culture, religion, or presence in the West, in order to prepare it for the entry into this Commonwealth. So you have the counteroffensive in Zaporozhye, the spring counteroffensive. Maybe it's a fake out and there's going to be something else happening somewhere else in Ukraine, a different counteroffensive that's going to fake out everybody. But you also have the possibility of recreating the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth with much of Ukraine inside of that Commonwealth. So you can see how the neocons have many different options that they're starting to float around. And another option that the neocons can just go to is to blame everything on Trump. That's another option, like they did the other day with their Afghanistan report. So the White House put out an Afghanistan report trying to explain what happened in Afghanistan, the debacle of the U.S. pullout from Afghanistan. And what was the conclusion? Trump's fault. That's simple. Trump's fault. Trump messed up. Trump didn't provide enough resources in Afghanistan to properly pull out of the country. Under Trump's presidency, the intel was not up to par, and Trump made a mess of things in Afghanistan. And Joe Bidenopoulos, Greece's favorite son, well, he inherited a situation which gave us the results of the Afghanistan debacle. So they just blamed it all on Trump. And so the neocon collective West also has the option, if Ukraine turns into a massive debacle, they have the option of releasing a report or a study, which they themselves conduct, which says that it's all Trump's fault or Putin's fault or someone else's fault, racism, white supremacy, I don't know. They can blame a whole bunch of people. And there you have it. So they always have that option as well. Let's now do a clown world and we will wrap this video up. And today's clown world, let's see. The Afghanistan one should be the clown world. But how about the U.S. ambassador to Russia and what she said the other day? I have visited different countries, talked with different leaders of states, but only next to Putin did I feel uncomfortable. It felt like I wasn't in charge here, but he was. Never experienced this before. Very unpleasant. The U.S. ambassador of Russia. I believe her name is Lynn Tracy. I believe that's what her name is. And Putin held an event for the new ambassadors the other day, and he talked about how tensions between Russia and the United States are at just an all-time high, and relations between the two countries have deteriorated because of Putin said it was all because of U.S. meddling in Ukraine, NATO expansion, the Maidan coup, and I believe the new U.S. ambassador to Russia was at this event. And she said she feels uncomfortable around Putin, and I know why she feels uncomfortable around Putin. I know why. Because she's probably never sat next to a leader or sat in the same room with a leader that is sovereign. That is sovereign, that looks after his country, and that doesn't take crap from the neocons, from the neo-libs. That's why she felt uncomfortable. She wasn't sitting next to a puppet stooge, and I bet you that made her feel very uneasy to be sitting next to someone like Putin, a real sovereign leader. Anyway, that is the clown world. The Duran.locals.com. We are on Rockfin and Rumble, ODYSEE, BitChute, and Telegram. And go to the Duran shop. 10% off. Use the code GOODDAY. Duran shop Instagram page. We are running a giveaway with all kinds of merch, like this lightweight hoodie. This is the flag of Kenya that I am wearing today. Take care.